This episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast is brought to you in part by No Judges Needed BJJ Apparel and Lavender Lane CBD products. You can use the promo code JJT for 20% off your first order at No Judges Needed, and the code JJTimes20, all uppercase. Last two items are numerical for 20% off your first order of CBD products. Thank you very much for sticking with us. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. I am your host, Kevin Bradley, joined as always by my co-host, Kevin Gallagher. And today we have a very special guest. Let me just read off some of his credentials so you know how legit he is. BJJ black belt, former King of the Cage, lightweight champion, and current UFC lightweight contender, Billy Quarantillo. Billy Q, thank you for coming by the show today. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, man. I really appreciate you guys having me. Shout out to Uncle Kev, who I've trained with for the last 10 years now. Uncle Kev actually coached me he was actually in my corner for my first fight, my first pro fight. So appreciate you guys having me. Shout out to No Judges Needed.
Yeah, I have figured since we're having a fellow rep for No Judges Needed to come on, we got to come out strong for the brand. So thank you, No Judges Needed. Once again, a good, really organic way. You can use the promo code JJT for 20% off checkout for all your No Judges Needed merch. Oh, and I think our boy Billy's got some merch at No Judges Needed. So go get that merch now, and then you'll be able to flip it for like $150 when he becomes UFC champion. So
there you go. There you go. Hold on to it. It's an investment.
So, yeah. How you doing, brother? You feeling all right, man? You excited coming off that big win?
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's how long it's taken to get here. The amount of uncertainty that we had to ever even get into the UFC. To be 2-0 now, to beat two really tough people, and especially to beat this dude, man. Because kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Just his whole his whole little personality, and like kind of how he was like talking all this smack, and acting like when he saw me, we're like, oh, what's up, man? So good to see you. And then saying on Instagram that he's gonna crucify me and do all this stuff. It was really happy to get this win, man. It was probably the most gratifying win to date.
Yeah, I didn't know as much about the backstory of everything that was going down until after the fight, when you kind of mentioned it in the press conference about some of the tactics that he was using, and apparently the guy's kind of a dick, and like. When you see a lot of modern UFC, a lot of modern UFC fighters, a lot of MMA fighters, they tend to incorporate that stuff into their personality in order to sell fights. Yeah. And like, I get that. It's about, building yourself so the fights become interesting. But I'm kind of with you in that vein too. Like, if you're going to talk shit about me on Instagram and try to beef everything up, like, don't come at me and shake my hand and give me a hug.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Cool. Like, I'm mad at you. I don't like you. You're an asshole.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. And it was, there was a couple things. So one, just saying that, like, when he came up, he's like, oh man, it's so good to meet you. And like, and it was acting all friendly. And he basically told Alon, was like being super friendly with Alon too. Alon basically told me the same thing, that he's like super friendly before a fight. And usually usually that's how it goes. Either someone's really friendly to you, or they just don't like, usually like you don't have to like come up and like shake my hand and like be super friendly. If you do that, and if I'm nice to you, and like you usually expect to see like nice things about each other on social media, instead of like, I'm gonna crucify his demons, this is gonna be a massacre, this is gonna be a gift. And I'm thinking, bro, I'm 13-2. I finished my last 5 opponents. Like, I'm not a gift or a massacre to anyone. Like, you're in for a fucking dogfight.
Yeah, like I find that a bit off-putting a lot of times when you have guys that come up to you and they're super happy and they want to meet you, and like before the match. Like, I'm the same way. When I compete, like, bro, like after the match, if we want to talk and we want to hang out, I'm cool. But before the match, like, I don't want to get to know you, because a lot of times what guys will do, like, they do that in a weird, creepy, like psychological way, whether or not they're doing it out of their own fear or they're trying to put you off. Like, if I look at you now as a nice guy, I'm not concerned about the way you're going to fight. And if you notice, that guy's kind of a fucking dick. Like, he came right out, charged you right after the bell, threw the kick right.
And I knew it was going to be out on right away.
Yeah, like that type of shit, like I'm not about that either, man. And I don't agree with things like that, man. I don't think that's right, man.
I will say that like getting in someone's like being personable is a big part of my jiu-jitsu game. Like if I'm doing a tournament, I'll look up everybody in my bracket and I'll like visit their houses individually and deliver them like pizzas, cupcakes. I'll pay off any like I'll try and pay off any loans they have. You know,
get to know them really well.
I'll steal their car, have it detailed, return it to them. You know, that sort of thing, and that really throws them off. Without that, I have no jiu-jitsu game.
That could be that could be intimidating, and like Kevin's talking about, it's definitely there's obviously mind games that go into it. But at the end of the day, most of the time I fight people, they're super respectable, like either before or after. Of course, there's like a little bit of smack talk, like, yeah, I'm going to beat this guy. Like, oh, I'm a better fighter. I'm this, like, or I think this is, like, I know I've put the work in, stuff like that. Like, so, sometimes it's generic, but, I think he does do a good job. I think he does a good job at like selling this, this perception that he's like this like crazy, like wild dude. But, in the second and third round, he was just like anyone else. Started getting tired. I started putting it on him, started pressuring him, and I felt like that was my game plan. It could have worked a little bit sooner. I think I could have been a little bit more dominant in the second, and even gotten a finish in the second or third rounds. But literally, it was my game plan to do what we did, and we were able to do it pretty effectively.
So, in my opinion, watching the fight, like I feel like. Because there was he fought at a catch weight, which in my I think is just ridiculous. Like I'm just from my point of view, like you're a goddamn professional. Like who gives a shit what's going on in the world? You made weight. You know what I mean? It's your job to make weight. Yeah. That's what you do. You get paid to do a thing, and you can't make weight. So he wanted to fight at 155, and you told him we could fight at 50 at a catch weight. I feel like that really worked to his advantage because watching that fight, I really felt like you would have, if he had to suck it up and cut those extra 5 pounds, he would have been sucked out for the fight. I think he would have finished him second round, probably early third round, just my opinion. But
yeah, it definitely it definitely, not to make any excuses because I got the win, but just talking about like what happened and like breaking it down from being a competitor, moving forward, that 5 pounds definitely helped him out to not have to cut the weight. I was already at 160, so I only had 10 pounds to cut instead of 15, which even for that isn't, 15 pounds isn't a lot of weight to cut. I could do that easily to 145. But also not, we really didn't have a lot of, I didn't do as much weightlifting. I did a lot of like jujitsu in like my buddy's garage, and mitt work in my backyard. And then we got some time in at GTS, but for the most of it, like not as much weight, like not as much like, throwing weights around, and obviously not as much as like classes as we're used to.
Yeah, and when you talk about cutting weight, and a lot of guys kind of have a misperception of what the philosophy behind cutting weight is. Yeah, you cut that weight so that you can compete at a smaller weight, but the rehydration part after you cut the weight plays a big deal. So if you're talking about a guy that has to cut down to 150 pounds instead of 145 pounds, now like you said, you started that weight cut at 60. He probably started that weight cut at, close to 70, 75. So by the time he gets down to 50 in the cage the next day, he was way, way bigger than you were, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Yep. And I even said in interviews or something like, man, it's kind of weird to say, but I'm like, yeah, he's probably going to be a little bigger and stronger, but I think I'm going to be able to weather that storm and find something, whether it was earlier in the fight or later. And if you did notice, like he came out super aggressive and had control the first like minute and a half, but within the first 2 minutes, I ended up taking his back too. And, credit to him because I feel usually super comfortable when I get on people's backs. But man, he was super strong and explosive, and he was able to kind of muscle out of a lot of those moves.
Yeah, he has legit jiu-jitsu too. Like there was no doubt about it. He was a very explosive kid, very strong. But watching the way he pinned the choke arm around and then exploding back in, like he was doing the right things from a positional aspect. It was more than just being a super athlete. Like he had a good wherewithal of what was happening in that position.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's a black belt in judo and a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. They said he wrestled a bunch in high school and stuff like that. And I know he has a good Muay Thai background. I was actually expecting it to be more of a stand-up fight, and I was looking forward to like standing and banging because my first UFC fight was mostly on the ground. and this one too. And I think a lot of that had to do with him kind of rocking me like early on, kind of coming at me aggressive. I kind of weathered the storm after that, and then I started taking over.
Yeah, just real quickly, you're talking a lot about gas tank and how confident you are. Not a lot of people entering the UFC have prior experience with those like championship rounds, like extended fights. And you've not only fought for a belt and a different promotion, you've won it. How much do you credit your gas tank with that kind of octagon experience?
Well, actually, I've been scheduled to fight in 2 5-round fights, but I finished both of them like early, so I never actually been to 5 rounds. But
well, yeah, the stakes are being there. Yeah,
I do have the experience of going 3-round like hard, winning 3-round decisions, against super high level guys. And that's happened throughout like the years where, like my opponent, he was 9-1, but he only went to 2 decisions. Everyone else, he basically just came out and took out right away in the first round. So yeah, just having that experience of being in those really tough fights. Another thing is a lot of the guys that he fought had like, not as good of records, or like the early fights like losing records. And I've been fighting tough people throughout pretty much my whole career. The past 7-8 years have been all high level guys, UFC veterans, Ultimate Fighter veterans, Bellator, guys that pretty much a really good roster of people, and so a lot of these guys don't have that.
So I'm curious to your point of view, because I watch you fight, and I see that your game is about breaking your opponent's spirit, and I think that when we talk about fights on as high a level of competition that you're at, that there's never going to be that much difference between your abilities versus your opponent's abilities. Like, you guys are always going to be pretty much, if you're in the big show, like you're fucking good. You know what I mean? You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're skilled. You're a skilled fighter. Like, how much of your approach is based upon understanding how to win that mental game of breaking your opponent's spirit?
Yeah, man, and it's just like we were just getting into about having that experience and seeing what I've been able to do to other people, and just having that confidence that as long as I trust in myself. I've always given myself a fighting chance. This was my 30th fight total. Counting my amateur fights and boxing match and Muay Thai fights. So yeah, just having that experience and going into it, and you're right. Like, we are going to get to a level where someone will be able to go 3 hard rounds with me, and that's where I just gotta, I basically just gotta beat them. Beat them on skill, beat them on technique. But in the meantime, I'm just gonna keep trying to break people like I've been doing.
Yeah, and just a follow up to that is like, so people will comment and say, like, Billy's he's a cardio machine. He's got this incredible cardio that doesn't quit. And like, I would say that's part of it, but I think it's a lot more to do with just your will to win and your unbreakable spirit. Like, what do you think the two components of that, how they vary back and forth?
Yeah, I don't know. That's I've talked to Matt about it. It's definitely not. It's certainly not just cardio. It's really not cardio at all, because I hate like running long. Like, you're not going to catch me running 10 miles. I'll run a couple miles, I'll run like a few miles a week, and like I'll bike ride and stuff, but I'm not like this like Lance Armstrong, super conditioned athlete. But what I can do is, I feel like I just, like, if you say go and you lock me in the cage with someone, I feel like I could just keep fighting. Like, and I have that mentality. Like, I'm pretty much trying to fight until like I die. Like, if someone is like, I'm basically like, the chances of me getting knocked out or submitted, I try to get that level so high that it's like almost like you are like unbreakable. Like, I'm very hard to submit, and I'm very hard to knock out. And as long as I can keep going, trying to break them, it's really just like my way of winning really.
Yeah, I'm gonna follow this up into another question about your BJJ and about your jiu-jitsu, and like, I watch you, and you're a black belt now, and like, I remember I've been rolling with you since for day one. I've watched you come up, and when I think about your style of jiu-jitsu, like I think about how your style of jiu-jitsu falls more into things that you don't see as often in actual MMA. And I'm going to say that by talking about your ability to not just maintain and control positions in advance, looking for a submission, or advance by holding someone down. Like what you do better than I think most people I've seen in MMA, and I'm not just saying this because you're my boy, I'm saying this because it's a fact. Like I think of you and I put you up in the same accord with Khabib in this, right, is your ability to inflict damage and continue to beat down and break your opponent's will by dominating his positions. Is there anything you do differently in your BJJ to be able to accommodate that?
I don't know, man. I mean, you know how it is at Gracie Tampa South. Like, you know how it is at our gym. It's a Shark Tank. And I think what attributes to it is, especially like I've been doing this. I've been doing, I've been training hard for fights for 10 years. I really don't ever take a lot of time off. And I always make sure, like, I always do my rounds back to back to back to back to back. Like, so if I'm doing like jiu-jitsu rounds and we're doing like 7 5-minute rounds or 7 7-minute rounds or 5 5s or whatever rounds we're doing, I don't ever take a round off. So like I think that has a lot to do with it. And just same thing with like MMA sparring. I'm always like the guy that has to stay in there. Maybe a couple of weeks out of a year will they let me be like the fresh guy where I come in fresh, but it's usually like I'm the guy in there like getting my rounds in. So I think a lot of it of just having that, practice how you play. You know what I mean? Like I'm coming at you, like me, Kevin knows, like I try to come at you. I'm like a little wolf attacking a grizzly bear.
It's true, dude.
And I try to come at you, and he's like this big dude, like throwing me around and using his paws. And that's with everyone. Like I go at everyone. I'm coming for their neck. Like you know how it is. Like Coach Canner, Pete Molinelli, Matt Arroyo, obviously, all the fighters, Matt Frivola, Troy Gerhart, Hugh. Aaron Harb, Lewis Mott. There's just so many people. Sorry, everyone I'm forgetting, but there's just so many people that give me good looks at the gym every single day.
Yeah, but in particular, when I do you agree with me that watching a lot of jiu-jitsu guys that do MMA, a lot of guys that are apparently like jiu-jitsu specialists in the MMA world, like I don't see them, like I see a lot of guys going to positions, and I see a lot of guys trying to take the back, and I see a lot of guys trying to work for the submissions, and I see a lot of rounds that like go kind of who really knows who won that round because no one really did any damage. Like when I watch you do jiu-jitsu, like you do damage from positions that you're dominant in. Is there something that you do differently from that? Is there something that you do?
Billy, I'm gonna answer this one for you. Kevin, he goes into every fight and he imagines he gets to punch you flush in the face.
That's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what I think it is, Kevin? Honestly, I think what it is with saying it like that, the reason is I think because I'm starting to get to that skill set of like a high level jiu-jitsu guy. You know what I mean? Like, like a jiu-jitsu guy, like a Jeff Paré, who's just really good at jiu-jitsu, but he doesn't do any like fighting. Right. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of being a jiu-jitsu guy, but I've also been hitting people and striking this whole entire time too. So I've been able to kind of mix in that, that higher level jiu-jitsu with that striking that I've been doing since day one. I basically, my first day of jiu-jitsu, it was basically grappling with punches. So we had MMA gloves on. We would grapple and basically just fight each other.
Yeah, I the only reason I bring this up is because I've had this conversation before. I talked to Wagner about it before, and we kind of had a similar conversation in the regards of, I hate to always say this because I still believe that any form of jiu-jitsu is still the best martial arts for self-defense that you can have on the planet. There's not even a close second. But the reality of it is like a lot of guys, when you see them compete, because they don't have to throw punches, they don't realize the idea. Like it's a different mount, and it's a different back take control, and it's a different side mount control when you start to understand, okay, I want to control you, but I also want to be able to posture up to do some damage and land some punches.
Yeah, well, I've noticed that too with like if we can ever recruit some like jiu-jitsu guys over to the cage and they'll do some like sparring with us, I notice anytime they get a takedown, or even if I'm on top of them, they're really smooth. Jiu-jitsu isn't as smooth anymore when I start smacking them in the head and kind of like fake bumping with my arms and like kind of punching them. There's a difference there. And if you get so comfortable with not ever getting hit or not ever rolling with really aggressive guys, that self-defense situation is going to feel like a train wreck of how aggressive it is. So that's kind of just how I do a lot more MMA jiu-jitsu rounds than most just jiu-jitsu people. So I think that makes a big difference too.
I think that's a good point for me to bring something up that I found really interesting, because I got to be honest. One of the reasons I'm so starstruck during this interview is that one of the first things I watched when I started really transitioning from just being into jiu-jitsu and also being into MMA was TUF 22. So like my man crush for Billy Q goes far back. Everyone's seen TUF 22. Great. But something that I noticed
Channing what was it, Wahlberg? Channing Wahlberg?
Yeah, Channing Wahlberg gets it done. There you go.
Man, he's a snake in the grass. But something I noticed in prepping for this interview is that a lot of times when like Faber or McGregor were describing your fights, they would focus on your toughness. You're rough around the edges, and that you were more of a brawler. And now, like cut to now, you are seen as a technician. You are a very like specialized like fighter who can mix it up on the feet, but incredibly deadly on the ground.
Yeah.
How would you describe your transformation from the show, like your style from the show, to your current tenure in the UFC?
Yeah, I just I had to get better. I had to put kind of a microscope on the things that I was doing wrong. And I still, of course, still make, hopefully way less mistakes now. But that was just a case of, before the Ultimate Fighter, I had six years total of training, like total, because, 5.5 years total training. And I got to experience that, like world-class fighters everywhere, so I got to be around that, kind of see how they were training, basically build the habit of training like they were training. And then I took that over the next, 4 or 5 years to what I've become in the last couple of years. And that's just, basically just getting the experience and, having 7 more fights since then. Just the experience, really, man. Just going with higher level guys and getting the experience of being around all that and seeing what it takes, and just knowing that even back then, I saw the guys like McGregor and Faber. When you're around them, you're touching and training with them, and like just listening to them, you realize they're not any different. Man, everyone's the same. I have the same mentality as they had. I felt like, and they're not superheroes. They're just people that just committed to their dreams and just didn't give up, and they made it.
Yeah, man, that's a big thing, Billy. I 100% subscribe to that thought process. Is that like when you start to meet your heroes and you realize that they're just the same as you, like they're just humans.
Yeah.
They're just humans that decided they had the will to do what it took to succeed. You start to realize, wow, like I can do that too, man. Like this guy isn't some god amongst men. He's just a normal dude that decided one day he was going to be a world champion or an MMA champion and went out there and did what he had to do to accomplish those goals, man. It's a big mindset to understand. So we talked a little bit about your longevity in the MMA world and how you started off. Again, you've been fighting for close to 11 years now, and how you got on TUF and then you lost, and then you had a couple of opportunities that fell through. You broke your knee, and all these things happened to you. And like what I find the most intriguing about you, and I think the most gratifying about you, is that you're what we call a journeyman fighter. You're that guy that wasn't the flash out of the pan, 10-0, fresh out of the gate, 5-0, super athlete, fresh out of the gate, that went straight to the UFC and went in there from there. You're the guy that really had to work for it. Had to fight in shitty little clubs and in horrible little spots and feel embarrassed about people coming to see you and live through all that. Like, how much of that plays into now you're in the UFC and you're going against some of these younger bucks? How much of that like empowers you and makes you realize, hey man, I've been through this shit. I know what the fuck I'm doing. Like you guys step aside. It's my time now.
Well, yeah, and just for the record, even when we were in these nightclubs and these bars, when I was an amateur, I was always proud, man. I always just thought, like, like growing up, like we didn't have like the highest expectations. Like we didn't. Well, like we always wanted to work for everything, but like just coming out to living in Florida and to start fighting out here, like I always just love. Like I was always telling people, like, yo, come on, check me fight, watch this, and those are some of the best times I'll look back on. But the only reason why is because now we are at this level now. So yeah, man, it's just it's been a great journey, and I'm gonna keep it going.
How many times did you think to yourself, like, maybe this isn't for me, what am I doing wasting my time? Maybe I should just go back to school. Maybe I should figure out something else. And was that ever something that ever like haunted you in the back of your head?
Yeah, no, it kind of popped up. It's popped up a couple times. You know what I mean? And the two biggest ones, the biggest one for sure is when I tore my ACL. That was and that was only 3.5, 4 years ago now. About 3 years ago. It was in 2017. So it was 3 years ago. That at that moment it was like, man, because it was right after I beat Eric Reynolds. I was already on the Ultimate Fighter. I just got done knocking out Eric Reynolds. Then I go to Favola. Favola goes on the Contender Series, gets in the UFC. I go out there with him and everything. Favola's in the UFC. I'm so happy for him. Then I'm so excited. I'm like, all right, I'm up next. I'm going to get one of these big fights. I'm going to get on the Contender Series. Then I tear my ACL in a wrestling practice. Then it was like, oh my God, dude. I knew, like, they're like, yeah, it's going to take at least a year to heal. You got to get surgery. The insurance at the time, like, wasn't going to cover it. Like, I was hearing all this stuff about, like, having to pay for it on my own. And luckily, like, that was definitely, like, the low point where I was like, damn, dude, like, you just made a huge mistake. You dedicated, 7.5 years to this, and now you have nothing. You have a blown out knee, and you have nothing. I didn't have anything. So that was definitely one of those moments where I was like, maybe you should think about going to school, using your brain more. So I was like, all right, let's see what happens. I ended up getting my real estate license just as like a backup plan. Kept fighting. Ended up doing a boxing match 8 months after the surgery. Winning a fight in my hometown, Buffalo, won the main event there, and then got the Contender Series opportunity, and the rest is history.
Yeah, man, like this, and I'm painting a picture here. I'm getting to a point because, like, we talked about how tough you are, and we talked about how driven you are, and we talked about how you break your opponents.
Yeah, I appreciate it, by the way.
Yeah, and like the narrative I'm trying to draw here is because I know you, kid. I always tell you how much I love you, man. I remember from day one. I always talked about like I remember when you used to work at Carrabba's, and when you got done at Carrabba's, I ain't going back. I ain't going back to Carrabba's. That was always a little joke we had with one another.
I'm not going back. No offense to my Carrabba people. Yeah, I worked at Shell's Seafood. I worked at Carrabba's. I used to hustle, man. I used to hustle on the weekends.
Yeah.
And then I would train during the week. I would take a couple nights and work there. It was train during the week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, working, slanging seafood and slanging Italian food. And then, and I always joke at what he's talking about is when we spar, I'll just be like yelling out. I'll get people motivated by like going. I just go do like a bunch of rounds, and I always tell people like I ain't going back to Carrabba's. I'll start yelling. Then I ain't going back. I ain't going back. I ain't going back to cleaning seafood plates.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I bring up all this stuff and I talk about all these things because I know you, and the reason I'm doing it is to paint a narrative because we talked about how tough you are and how amazing you are and how you break your opponents, and the reason is because like. You've been through shit in your life, man. You know what I'm talking about? Like you have had to suffer and had to overcome as that journeyman fighter to have all these doubts, to have all these problems.
Yeah.
You weren't always the most gifted guy in the world. You know what I'm talking about? You weren't some D1 wrestler that jumped out of college to go right into the UFC. Like you had to really work for it. You had to really struggle for it. And that struggle and that ability and that like internal fire inside of you, it shows into your fights. It's someone that kind of has a little bit of that inside of me. I want to tell you how much I appreciate you for doing that, kid.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And like I always basically what really got me into MMA was just wanting to like like the world championship was always the goal because I want to fight like the best guys in the world. But basically just having fights that people can look back on and being like, damn, dude, like that was a wild ass fight. Like that dude can fight. Like Billy Quarantillo can fight. I want people at the bars to be like, wow, like that. I want to watch Billy Q fight. Like that's what it's all about. So that's really what I came for. Like I'm going to keep going. And I know I could get in the top 15, the top 10, fight for a world champion. Like Alex Volkanovski is like this tall. Like it's not like he's not Khabib. So my big 5'10" ass, like all gangly. I feel like I'm giving a lot of these guys problems. So it's gonna be a cool story that I could write in the next few years.
I just got to say personally, I know you come from Buffalo. I went to college in Olean, New York, and the only jujitsu, the only jujitsu that I had access to, just because I started doing jujitsu like my junior year, I would drive an hour and a half to Buffalo United Martial Arts, and then I would drive back. That was my whole Saturday. Is I got to wake up, crack of dawn, get there for beginner class, and then I've never met a more annoying group of like tough assholes than the people that train MMA and jiu-jitsu in Buffalo. Like, fuck the lot of you, for real. Like, you made me feel like I was a white belt all the time. But
that's funny, man.
And
I know where Olean is. That's funny.
That is, you are the only person I think we will ever have on this show that I didn't go to school that knows Olean, New York. Jesus Christ. Well, King of the Cage is a massive promotion up north. It gets a lot of goodwill, a lot of homegrown talent. So how did it feel fighting for them, winning a title there? Like, what did that do for you in your career and like mentally?
Oh, I have a love-hate relationship with King of the Cage. I fought for them, I think 3 or 4 times. I fought back up for them in New York. So I loved it. They were in my hometown. And so it was literally like minutes away from, where it is in Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
So I would always go back up there and fight in Niagara Falls. And the hating part was like they didn't really pay me accordingly. And it basically got to a point we had to go like 50-50 because I was selling out these cards for them in Western New York, like my hometown. And the promoter didn't want to pay me. And then he basically tried to get me into to sign a long-term deal, like right before I got in the UFC. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that. So luckily, like it worked out. But, that's the regional scene for you, man. They're not making a ton of money. So they don't want you to make a bunch of money, even though I was bringing in massive crowds up there.
So let's segue into that for a second. So being as someone that's been around, the fight game as long as you have, I've been around the fight game for a while time, but with boxing and professional fighting for a long, long time, and just seen like the business of boxing. Like, what do you feel about that as a fighter? That, a lot of times, like, fighters aren't necessarily like the promoters want to make money, but sometimes fighters aren't necessarily the most important piece of the pie. Do you feel like that's changed in recent times? Do you feel like people are trying to make good on helping out fighters as much as they can?
Yeah, I think so. And I think coming up, and you're seeing it with like the UFC and you've seen it with other promotions, but like coming up, there really wasn't that much money for fighters until the last few years, to be honest, and Conor McGregor is a big part of that. He was the first one that is consistently on the Forbes, the Forbes highest paid athletes. So yeah, there's the UFC took a lot of chances early on. And so that's why they're worth as much as they're worth now. But like these guys say, like, who doesn't want to raise, to make more money? And right now, I think it's a really good time to be a fighter because there's a lot more money now in MMA than there was ever before. And that's also going to help jiu-jitsu people, I think, too. Just jiu-jitsu athletes and jiu-jitsu stars. The bigger the ceiling is for, combat sports, the better it is for everyone.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I think we're starting to get better with that because I can remember like it's a dirty business, man. Fighting, like, I see a lot of kids that I know that want to be professional fighters, and I look at them and I say to myself, man, like, if you're not going to go in it to win it, like, don't do it at all. Because even like when you get to the top of the pyramid, like, it almost ain't worth it. You do it because you love it, and do it because, like, it's a part of you and you're driven to do it. But if you're doing it because you really want to make shit tons of money and make a living off of it, you're in it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I remember coming up, a lot of people were like, "Oh, I want to get in the UFC. I want to get in the UFC," and they don't realize, like, there's no easy fights in the UFC. Like, they're coming to kill you, and they're all good. And these guys that, like, take these easier fights, and they don't want to train when their fight's over, and they want to take time off, and they don't want to spar ever. It's a dog eat dog world, man. It's a vicious. It's a vicious way to make some money. I'm still feeling sore from my fight. My shoulder's all jacked up, my leg. Like,
yeah, dude.
It ain't easy living. I gotta rehab everything.
Yeah, it's not an easy living at all. So,
yeah, and you guys know from jiu-jitsu is even harder.
Well, I just wanted to. I think that's a really good brief segue before I kick it back to Kevin. Is that your credentials in MMA are beyond reproach, but many people probably don't know how accomplished you are, even though you got promoted to black belt right after a fight, which I don't even think it's been a year. Congratulations again for that. That must be really cool. Is there any part, and even though it's still early into your UFC career, is any part of you thinking about possibly branching out into like grappling shows like Submission Underground or Polaris? Because you see a lot of MMA fighters, like big name guys, doing that when they're not immediately preparing for a fight, just to keep skills sharp. Is there any interest in that for you?
Yeah, there is down the road. Right now, I really just want to, like, get back into my MMA training camp, though. Like, I want to get ready to fight again. And I feel like, some guys are able to do it, but man, it's risky, because you've also seen guys, like I saw Cub Swanson. He did a grappling match and he jacked his knee up. It's pretty risky. It's pretty risky to do, especially with some of these guys with their leg locks, So right now, probably not, just because I want to get right back into training camp and I want to fight again soon. I think there's going to be some big opportunities in the next couple of months. And so I'm going to get ready to fight again soon. But who knows, man, maybe something happens where I feel more inclined to do a quick grappling match and against a bigger name, do a grappling match and then get ready for another fight.
So just to switch gears again, we talked a little bit about, let's get back to the fight. Let's go back to the Spike fight this weekend, because in particular, I want to talk about the second round, because there was a lot of debate over what happened in that second round and who won that fight. Because when I was watching the fight, it was very clear that Spike won the first round, and then you completely dominated the third round. I mean, the first round was close, but Spike was definitely the aggressor. Yep. He came out harder and won the first round. Now, so that second round. So I was watching the fight live. Me and Eric Parker were watching the fight live, and like, I am pretty knowledgeable in my MMA understanding of MMA, but unfortunately, most MMA judges aren't. And I have watched that round, not particularly your round, but the way that round played out over and over and over again throughout my course of watching MMA fights. And I will say that 9 times out of 10, Spike wins that round. And when I was watching the fight, I was very concerned watching it live, because I thought for sure, I knew what was going on. I knew you were throwing up more submission attempts. I knew you were doing more damage. I even knew when you went for that guillotine, when Spike flipped back on top of you, you initiated that takedown. But I also understand how judges that don't necessarily understand the nuances of jiu-jitsu and MMA in general would have scored that fight the other way. Like, do you feel like that round in particular was a wake-up call, and maybe that now judges in particular are starting to become more intelligent in their judging of fights and starting to really understand the way fights should be called?
Yeah, well, and they actually kind of changed the rules on that. So I knew I know that the criteria now is, it used to be 30 seconds, basically how they explained it to us, this has been around for a couple of years now, that it used to be, based on striking, grappling, octagon control. And those are to be looked at like kind of the same, right? So like the striking is the same, the grappling and the octagon control is all judged based on the same. Okay. Like they're judged equally.
Right.
Now it's based on the order it's based on striking first, then grappling, and then octagon control, meaning like who's taking the center of the cage. But what that also means is now that grappling, like if you go and take someone down and you don't do anything, and that person's either hitting you or you're just kind of like laying on them, they don't judge it as like a 10-9 round anymore. They base it more on the striking. And also because of my round, there's a couple things. One, I was definitely closer to finishing him. Like those triangle chokes, I felt like, they look at that and they're like, okay, this guy's on top of him more, but who's actually closer to winning? And right. He's not hitting me with anything big. He didn't really hit me anything big after the first couple minutes of the fight. So then that plays into consideration too. And I think a lot of people that were watching it, because when I watched it back, there's a moment where DC and Bisbee are talking and DC's like paying attention, but they're not judging it. You know what I mean? You're not paying attention like a judge. Right. And for him to be like, oh yeah, Spike's on top for a little bit. So, he probably won that second round. And then they kind of go back and he's like, oh yeah, like, that's what he thought before. So that's what he says. And it's like, those guys' job are to kind of keep everyone informed, but they're not judging it like actual judges. Right. So of course, I thought it was a close round. I know I dominated that third round. The game plan was obviously to break him and finish him. And, he slipped through the cracks, but I think watching it back, if you're watching like who's doing more damage, it's definitely me. Who's closer to finishing the fight, that's me. And the only thing he really had was top control, which really wasn't much control because I was throwing up submissions and stuff like that.
Yeah, I went back just like you did. I went back the next day and rewatched that second round. And, and when I was caught up in the emotion of it, I thought you lost the second round just because, I'm riding the emotional wave. And in my mind, okay, fuck, he lost that second round or it's too close to call. Like he's got to go out and get a finish type thing.
Kevin, what happened was you listened to DC and you're like, oh shit, DC said it, so I'm going to believe it. You guys were all trapped by it. And I get it. Like you listen to him and you're like, oh, like your brain is just going along with that story. But we're in an empty arena and there's three judges and they're like, nah, man, like Billy won that. Like, the three judges watching it, not listening to commentary, thought I won.
Not the assholes at the bar. And then you know what? The end of the day, too, is this, bro. They're the only motherfuckers that matter.
That's true, right, dude.
What's funny though is that in the past there have been MMA rule sets that have gone further into considering like attempted submissions from the bottom. Like that plays a bigger part. Like I know Pride was really big on that. And you saw people say, you saw people saying like the only example I'm thinking of right now is like Neiman Gracie versus Rory McDonald. I think a few months, like closer to the beginning of 2019 or the middle of 2019, they fought and Rory was really positionally sound, but Neiman was threatening a lot of submissions. Yeah. And someone did the math as to like the averages of like in Pride rules, he probably would have been able to eke out a decision.
Yeah.
Do you, as a black belt, do you think the UFC and bigger MMA in general does enough to recognize like submission attempts, or do you think there can be more done there?
Yeah, there can definitely be more with the judging. I think I follow that Verdict MMA on Instagram. It's just cool to see what they say. It's just like a bunch of people that all like give you their scorecards, and what it does is, in my opinion, it counterbalances the margin of error with three people. Of course, there could be people that get it wrong. At the end of the day, though, as a fighter, as a black belt, I'm just trying to finish the fight at every moment. Like I'm either trying to knock you out or submit you, like the whole fight, So for me, I just gotta get back in that finish column.
Yeah, man. Like again, it goes back into just when you're in a fight, you're putting rounds in the bank, and it's because you're going for that finish whenever you're going for things like when you and that's something that like younger fighters should learn to do, because that's a difference between someone's just going to be there and someone that's going to continue to be there. Like you put those rounds in the bank, always look to score, always look to do damage, because that's what wins fights, and that's what should win fights. And I'm glad that round went to you because you definitely deserved to win it. It would have been I would have been upset. I wouldn't have punched the television if you lost, but I would have been very upset if you would have lost that. I mean, I would have probably punched Eric Parker, but
yeah, I tried so hard to win that fight and knock him out, and just to beat him on all three scorecards. Like, I know I won that fight, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter anymore. It's on to the next one. Like, whether I won or lost, we both had a great fight, and I get that win bonus, and I know if the fight continues, I know what's gonna happen anyway. Like, if me and him have that fight in a dark alley, I know I'm walking away from there fine. So no one almost. I mean, it's the facts though. I wasn't close of getting knocked out, and I wasn't close of getting choked out.
I agree with you too. Like, I even said that to one of my clients, one of my private lesson clients that I was watching the fight with, because he was asking me who you thought won, and I said, you know what, man, if you ask me who won that damn fight, if you put each other side by side, it's very very obvious that Billy was the winner of the battle. You know what I'm talking about? Like, Billy, like, if you look at Spike's face, you look at your face, like, Spike was half dead. You were ready to go for another 3-4 rounds. Like, if it continued on, you would have finished him. No question in my mind. But because of the criteria of scoring, it would have been a travesty. But, if that second round goes the other way, you lose the fight.
Of course, man. I get it, man. It's the first close fight I've been in since my pro debut. So I'm very fortunate that I'm able to find ways to finish fights.
I'm going to ask a totally selfish question, and it's going to break the flow of this whole thing.
He's not going to send you a pair of his underwear or anything.
No. Don't embarrass yourself. That's after the show. That's after the show, Kevin. God, there is a structure to this. Now I don't feel bad about asking. Hey, Billy, how often do you kick Kevin Gallagher's ass? Please tell me, because I love to hear it.
No, we don't. Me and Kevin get it in. We've been training together for a while. We just go back and forth like he's like my big brother or something. So it's Uncle Kevin. And I believe I gave him the moniker Uncle Kev back in the early days. I would call him Uncle Kev. He reminds me of my Uncle Bill. Just like a super super chill and laid back.
Billy's a tough motherfucker.
I was gonna say, quit. Kev, what's and I'm just gonna pretend Billy's not here. Kev, what's Billy's game like when you're rolling?
Billy's very, very. Billy has a good guard. Billy's good everywhere. Billy, when he gets on your back, you fucked up. Billy just doesn't quit. I always say this about Billy when I talk about guys that don't quit when I think they should. Like, Billy is either A, too proud, or B, too dumb. And that is what I mean by that is you're too proud to quit, or you're too dumb to know when you're beat. And both of those things, they add up, because I know a lot of guys Billy would rather die than say Coach Kevin got me. And if God forbid I ever submit him, I know when we smack hands again, he's going to come at me like I stole something. And every time I roll with him, and there's very few people that can do this to me, because I kind of pride myself on being able to suck the life out of people. It's a lot about my game. No, but exactly. Again, I compete in very similar ways, and my game is very similar to what Billy's game is. I try to suck the life out of you and wear it out on you, and cause you to make a mistake and either frustrate you. And Billy doesn't get frustrated; he doesn't quit, and it's a testament for me from someone that tries very hard to do that to people and is very good at that. To roll with someone like Billy that just doesn't fucking stop. And like I said, it comes down to they're either too dumb to know they're beat, or they're just too prideful to admit they're beat.
That's true. I'll take it. And just shout out to him and the rest of the Gracie Tampa South team, man. We definitely have something special there. Matt Arroyo has done an excellent job of keeping a wealth of high level training partners there day in and day out. Every time I go there, like Monday night, I can't roll tonight because of my shoulder. But it's going to be just a shark tank of black belts and fighters and UFC guys and Bellator guys and just your average Joes that just train every single day that are sneaky savages.
How did you find your way down south, by the way?
So I moved in. I was getting my associate's degree in Buffalo, and my sister was going to the University of Tampa. And we would take vacation trips down to Florida, different parts of Florida. And then I had to get out. I had to get away from, the routine I was finding myself in. I was going to a community college, hanging out with, a lot of my friends got away to college already. And they were out kind of just pursuing their goals. And I just felt like if I stayed there, I wasn't going to I wasn't going to reach my goals. I didn't think I'd get to, the UFC to be a world champion, because that's kind of what I figured out I wanted to do in college. I'm like, man, I want to, take a run at this thing. And then I moved down. I basically visit my sister, and I came to Gracie Tampa South, and then I came to the University of South Tampa, both in the same day. And I got such good vibes from like the gym and like just the atmosphere there. And I got like the worst vibes ever from like USF. And I was like, man, I don't want to go here, man. And I definitely didn't want to go to UT either. So I was like, you know what? They basically said like the college was going to be way more expensive since I wasn't a Florida resident. So they said if you wait 1 year, you could be a Florida resident. So I was like, all right, that was my excuse. I'm like, yeah, I'll just go back to school in 1 year if it's meant to be. And then I just started at the gym. I started training and I started fighting like pretty soon after. And then that's when I worked in all those crazy jobs, and I just worked my way up to where I'm at now.
Dang.
So I got one more question
wild.
for you. One more question for you I want to touch on, just because I know this is something that's kind of specific to you. So like the last 2 fights you've had, you've been on Dana White's tongue. Like he spoke about you in your last fight. Was a fight to watch out for, and he spoke about you on this last fight coming up. Your first fight and this last fight coming up is someone to come up to him. And I think that's a testament to your abilities in the cage. But I also think it has to do with your personality and the fact that you let people know who you are and you don't really give a shit about it. And like that's something that I see a lot in UFC. I see a lot of UFC guys that try to do that because they try to get the spotlight, and it comes off a little bit fake. Like when I think about you, like you're one of them dudes that does it authentically because that's just who you are. Like you go out there and you're a ham, and it's part of what makes you drive. You get into that smack talking routine. Like tell me a little bit about where that comes from.
Well, I never wanted to like get into the UFC and be like this like crazy like made up character. Like when my opponent came out with like his bird mask, I was like, come on, dude, like you're such a clown. Like come on, bro. Like and that's just not like me. But I grew up talking shit to my brothers. I have 3 older brothers. My sister, who's super wild. Kevin's met her a bunch of times. She's always getting crazy at my fights. So it's just I live in like I always grew up with a kind of like a wild environment. I was always attracted to the people that were like a little bit louder, a little bit more outspoken. It's just over the years of competing, playing different sports, and talking trash. When I see like these little dorks on Instagram or Twitter, like tell me I lost some money, or that, oh, you didn't lose the fight, bro. Like, bro, I don't care. Like, of course if I have the time, I'm going to say something back to you, and I'm going to let you know what I think of you too.
That's great, man.
And there's a lot of it.
I blew my mortgage payment on you, Billy Q.
Yeah. They're like, that was a robbery. Like, you think you really won that fight? And I'm like, dude, they paid me for it. So either way.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Guess I did.
I know. Like they told me I did, and they raised my hand after. So, but I get it, man. Like if I was betting and I was like, one of these miserable people, or some of them are just younger, some of them are like, like teenagers and stuff like that they play their like little FanDuel accounts. And if you're betting on someone you thought like, oh, he's got red hair, he's a maniac, I'm gonna bet on him. Well, like the work always shows, man. Like the work I put in is, it speaks for itself. If and when I lose, like it's going to be a mistake I made, not because like I'm going to get outworked or like I'm going to quit or something like that. Like that's not going to happen.
I feel like for a lot of these guys, when they start putting money on fighters, it's like they're suddenly rich, like Roman emperors with slaves that they're throwing into the meat grinder. Like, you fool, get back and fight the lion. I own you. I put $50 on you getting a first round TKO. Back to it, knave. And then they throw like olives at you or some shit. I don't know.
Yeah, it's wild, man. It's wild how many people bet, but it's all good, man. Like whether they're saying good things or bad things about me. I'm looking to keep growing my name and get to that, start finding some good opponents that are going to keep putting on good shows.
Well, I think that's I know that we don't want to keep you. Oh, who's the little guy?
Cooper wants to say hi.
Hey,
Coop,
Coop.
who's that bud?
Hey,
Who's
Cooper.
that bud?
Oh,
Hey,
it's a
buddy.
good
Hey,
dog.
buddy. Hey, buddy.
Ah,
Hey, buddy.
cool, dude.
Yeah, he just lays around all day. He chills.
Yeah,
Oh, what a
good
cool
life.
He's
dude.
like, y'all are still talking.
Rough
But
life.
I think it's a
Yeah.
good point to say, like, we actually had another real solid jiu-jitsu up and comer in the UFC, Chase Hooper, on, and he took a lot of time to talk about some fighters that he views are like marketed as jiu-jitsu guys, but have let their ground game sort of fall by the wayside. Do you have any hot takes on certain UFC jiu-jitsu players' grappling abilities, or any call outs you want to make?
Oh, and people who I want to fight.
Yeah.
Well, so there are some big names out there. Chase is one of those guys. He's a young up and coming fighter. You know, he had that tough. He just lost that fight to Caceres.
Yeah.
But he's a big name, and we actually Kevin actually rolled with him too. I don't know if Kevin remembers me and Chase and Kevin all rolled with each other at the UFC PI. And,
Was that Chase Hooper?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Yeah, that's
remember
fuck yeah.
him and his buddy, and you're like, oh, what's he, a brown belt? I'm like, yeah, I think so.
I remember that. I do remember
yeah,
that. Yeah, he was there for the contender with you. He was a kid, right? Yeah, god damn. I remember that.
Yeah. He was young. So there's a few names that of people who I think I'm gonna get matched up with. Alex Caceres is a fun fight because he actually eliminated one of our teammates at the time, Paul Barrow, from the Ultimate Fighter in like 2011. It must have been 2010 or 2011. So he's been in the UFC that entire time. So he's always someone that, you know, he's a fun fight. Like, he does a lot of crazy stuff. He's had fight of the nights with Yair Rodriguez and a couple other guys. I was already matched up with that dude Chris Fishdicks. So Fishdicks or Gavin Tucker. Gavin Tucker is someone who I also got matched up with. Who Gavin, he seems like a good dude. Like, he's not like this guy Spike, who like I really didn't like. Gavin seems like a cool dude. Like, I've heard about him from his gym, and he trains at TriStar with Faraz.
Mm-hmm.
So he's legit. He's 11-1. That'd be a real good fight. It'd be a tough fight. And so yeah, one of those guys I think are next. One of those three guys. In the meantime, though, I'm trying to either fight at one of the last Fight Island fights or the first fight with a crowd back. So those are like my goals, my plans.
Cool, man. Well, fuck. What you got? Anything else, Kev? You got any other questions for him?
I mean, I guess just because I forgot to mention it earlier, but like, how did it feel rolling or fighting without a crowd? You know, I'm
kind of used to it, man. I fought twice on the Ultimate Fighter. I fought twice on this UFC Apex now. Once on the Contender Series, once now for this. So I've done it a bunch of times. Usually when we train at the gym, there's really not that many people there anyway. So it just felt like just kind of a regular fight, like kind of like a street fight.
That's cool, man. Like, anyway, brother, like I can't tell you how much I love you. I usually spend the last 30 seconds talking to everybody up. You know that shit, bro. You're my fucking boo, man. Like, I love you fucking ever and shit, man. We're gonna see each other in the gym in like 20 minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna see you. I'm like, you're actually at my house right now.
Yeah, I'm actually like, he's in the other room. We're roommates.
Just breaks the illusion completely.
No. Yeah, I don't know where you're at, but I'll see you tonight, man. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, any sponsors, anything you want to shout out before we kick off?
They just all the Tampa places that helped me out. OTB Cafe, Driven, Southern Tire, No Judges Needed. The Live Alive Tampa Bay, my CBD company. Everyone, man. Grace Tampa South. Just everyone who cryotherapy. U.S. Cryotherapy was a big time healing me this training camp. Dr. Greg Zerwin, he's the man. Always fixing the jiu-jitsu guys. Everyone, man. I got such a big team. I appreciate everyone's help, and we're just getting things started. On to the next one.
Holy shit! I felt like I was just at the Oscars. Like that. You were thanking everybody. You were thanking everybody.
Well, you get to a certain level, and if I have to drop one name, I gotta basically give it. give shout out to my whole team, man. And it's easy to say because they've been with me the whole time. So it's like the same people.
You forget somebody, you're definitely gonna get. You forget to tag somebody, you're definitely gonna get a message.
I probably said like 9 out of 10. So now I'm gonna hear from someone. They're listening. They're like, man, this guy.
Well, Billy, I love you, man. Thanks for coming on the show, kid.
Love you
I
too,
appreciate
Kev.
you, brother. Yeah.
All right,
Appreciate
well,
you guys.
This has been another episode. I gotta close it out officially, Bill. There's a
Okay.
order of operation. This has been another episode of the Jiu-Jitsu Times podcast. I have been your host, Kevin Bradley, joined by my co-host, Mr. Kevin Gallagher, and Billy Q. Honestly, it means a lot to have you on, sir. Thank you very much for sharing us your time and a lot of great stories and a lot of your background. We cannot wait to see what you do next. But for all our listeners, stay safe, love your friends and family, and just remember to say your prayers, eat your vegetables.
Christ,
How about that? Yeah, I don't know. I'm starstruck. All right,
You're supposed to be the professional, man.
Man, I'm so glad there's an entire coastline dividing us, Kevin. I swear to God, you make me tear my own hair out. I love you, buddy, but Jesus. All right, thank you, Billy. I'm tripping at the finish line, but we'll see y'all next time. Good night.
See you later, man.